Welcome, everybody, to the Polite Political Discourse podcast. I am your host, Tyler Overbey, and I'm here with my co-host, Dakota Coddington. How are you doing today?
Doing quite fine, actually. Quite fine.
That's good to hear. Today, we are here to talk about the role of the national government in our society. So, to begin, I'm going to start with the question. I don't know if you'd like to start. I think because I introed it, you can go first. What should the role of our national government be in our society? Dakota.
One of my big things is I don't believe the national government should be this huge force, because the more power you give, the more easily it can be corrupted. As they say, with absolute power comes absolute corruption. So I believe, we should have a federal government, but I don't believe that it should be this gigantic thing that's, I'm not going to say it's corrupt in nature, but it could easily be corrupted. So I say we should have smaller governments and let the state governments decide, what their laws are and whatnot. So, what about you?
Well, I kind of have a little bit of a different perspective on it, because I think that there's been times in our country's history when the state government laws alone have kind of acted against the favoring rights of the citizens in the country, and by that I mean especially southern states in the past, there was the Jim Crow laws, and the problem that I've seen in a lot of those polls is that I think that the overall population isn't exactly represented. I feel like there's minorities that there's a large section of minorities that don't vote, and I'm not saying that it's because they don't or whatever. I just think that if they did, they would be voting a little bit more in favor of the national government policies or the stances that suit themselves. Because the thing was that these Jim Crow laws were the Jim Crow laws that were put in place that restricted interracial marriage. The reason why those got through was because the minorities weren't able really to represent themselves and say, no, this isn't wrong, we need to do something about it. But as soon as they went to the national government, it got sorted out because there was a more overarching, coverage over it all. To reel it back into the main question of just what the function of the government should be, I've always been a strong contender of the fact, or I believe that the national government should be strong. It should be, it should feel a sense of responsibility to involve itself in a lot of our country's problems, because I think a lot of people argue that the states can do it on their own, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that the federal government can help, and I think that there are a lot of ways in which it can, by being involved, people think that they're going to take the power for worse, but I think a lot of good can come out of it. So let's break down our two sides of this into subsections. So we have a list. What is the first thing on the list?
We have education, healthcare, support, and just the general role, as well as equality.
So the first one's education?
Education.
All right, so here's the thing. If the federal government doesn't step in with education and try to streamline it, there's going to be an issue in contrast of graduation rate, literacy rate, success rate in the different states, because there's going to be some states that prioritize it, fund it, and it's going to have a lot more progressive programs that help students get through, and there's going to be some states that aren't going to prioritize it as much, and then it's going to lack the sort of uniformity that I think that, especially as a nation, our country should have a little bit of, because I don't think that they should have some unification, because I don't think that people in different states should have different levels. Imagine if all the states chose what sciences they chose. Because, that's a big topic in education is, should we teach evolution? Because a lot of the states in the Bible Belt will say no. They'll say, oh no, well, we shouldn't teach that because that conflicts with religion. Isn't it creationism? Is that what it is?
Yeah, or creationism.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where, it should, regardless of whether or not they teach evolution, that's not the argument I'm trying to make. it should be streamlined. Because if a bunch of people are being taught one thing and a bunch of people being taught not necessarily something different or something like the opposite, but it's definitely not going to be the same, you know? And I think that the federal government's, the things that they've done have allowed for a lot more equality in schools, have a lot for fairness and equal representation. And I think it's all because of the federal government. And I want to know what you think.
The thing is with that is I can understand like wanting to have centralized education, centralized goals, centralized teachings, but the problem with that is there's always students that get ahead. Like we have kids that are going to college level classes right now, and if we were to centralize that system for them, like it wouldn't work out. Like take for example, we have Common Core. I don't know how much you know about Common Core, but the big thing with Common Core is it's just a bunch of people that somewhere else in the country they decided, hey, we should make this teaching and we should force it on the entire country. And it's not that it's a bad idea, it's just the execution is just horrible, because what they created a system where a bunch of people who don't know how to teach are imposing their ideas on people. And I'm not saying that
teachers shouldn't have free will.
Yeah, but what I am saying is when you centralize it that much, when you force that wide variety of people, like we have different people in every different part of the country, when you centralize something such as education or other things like that much, and you focus it in on one, like you broaden the spectrum too much, and it becomes too much.
So you're saying it should be the responsibility of the states?
Yeah, essentially, that's what I'm saying.
The states can handle it more than the national.
Maryland and Tennessee have two of the best education systems. They rank the best on the top scores. They exceptionally do well on testing, and I believe that's because they put extra effort in to educating their people. And if other states don't do that, the government can still help with that. Like, they can provide grants and stuff, but I don't think it's the government's job
it should be the local
to regulate.
People.
It should be the local people. Like, when the people go, hey, we're not getting a good enough education, they go, hey, they talk to their government or their local government, or they petition or something, and they get more money for their city. But when the federal government steps into that, it's not going to work. It's just too centralized.
I'm so glad that you brought up Common Core, because I completely didn't even think about that, and then you bringing that up kind of is a very good counterpoint. I just wish, and I agree, I do agree wholly that I think the Common Core could have been done a lot better, but I think that my biggest stress in terms of where I preside on this stance is that I worry, because you said that Maryland and Tennessee have the best state education.
Of the best.
I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying that what I'm saying, I worry about the people that the country or the states that don't. You know?
Yeah.
I think, and because I mean, it's one thing to say the local people will step up and figure it out, and I have hope. You know, I'm a little optimistic that might happen, but not as much as I probably should be, because I don't think that people really take the time to realize the circumstances they're in. They just think that that's the way it is, and with education especially, it would take a lot to make the change, and I think that the federal government puts the right changes in at the right times, like the Title IX amendment, not amendments, but the legislation that they put in to give equality for women in schools was great. And I think it's not even just about equality. I think when the federal government, maybe not for Common Core where they streamline teaching ideals, because I think that was poorly executed, but I think they need to just have a conversation. They need to work together. It doesn't necessarily have to be federal mandates, this is the way that it's going to be taught and this is what's going to be taught. But it should be a collaborative sort of teacher what do you think we should be teaching? What do you think we should be teaching? What does this school say we should be teaching? Because that's what our school does. They go, oh, hey, what are all these other awesome schools doing? And then the journalism program, you're in journalism and I'm in journalism. That's why we're doing this podcast. They were talking about the Campanile. We get a lot of ideas from that amazing journalistic site. And I think a lot of our ideas in our school in terms of teaching come from the other teachers at the other schools that our teachers have reached out to and asked, hey, what should we do? And that synthesis is the perfect harmony between that. But if it wasn't for the federal government, I don't think that could have ever happened. Anyway, moving on, because I know we got more topics to talk about. What is the second one?
Healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay, do you want to start with this one, or do you want me to?
I'll take this one.
You want to go? Go for it.
My thing is with healthcare is I'm all for helping people. I love helping people. You'll see me holding doors for people. You'll see me picking up stuff for people. I love helping people.
I totally agree too.
Like, right. I have a passion for people. But I think the problem with centralized healthcare is once you have, like we have Obamacare. Like, you give everybody healthcare. Mandatory healthcare. And that jacks the prices up for everybody because now supply and demand, they're running out of supplies, so they need to raise up the prices so that they can make more supplies, or there's the healthcare companies that already exist, they now have competition, so they have to either A, raise their prices because they're losing customers, or B, lower their prices because they're losing customers. But neither of those are going to work in this case because they're always going to get beat because the government's just giving out not free healthcare. But they're making everybody take their healthcare, or they're just making everybody take healthcare. So I think the problem is when the federal government tries controlling it too much, it's not going to work. Because personally, my dad, he has had 2 kidney transplants. He's been on dialysis for a while. Well, this is years ago.
Oh, okay.
This is years ago, but he still has to take medicines every single day, 2 times a day for the rest of his life.
Oh,
and
God.
when the companies have to raise their prices because they're getting beat out or because they're not getting as much money as they were before, it hurts not only us, but the companies themselves, because now they're running out of money because everyone's just going, hey, we'll just go to this healthcare plan. And it'd be different if, like, it was totally inclusive, but you can't give everybody, like, perfect healthcare. It's not going to be the same.
Right.
So I believe healthcare should be kind of like state-run again, or just simply just let it go to the people, to the companies that do it. And when they create competitions between themselves, it'll not only benefit their people, but it'll benefit each other. Because when you have that competition, they're going, I need to get lower, I need to get lower, I need to get lower. But
without it,
when the competition's just the government, you can't really beat the government when it comes to that kind of thing. So it just ruins it.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts?
I have 2 things, but the biggest thing I want to talk about, I'll say after. But in terms of my stance, in terms of differing from you and to approach it from the other side, because I think that it's great. Like, Obamacare is great in terms of the idea of giving everyone I believe in universal health care.
It's good in concept.
It is. And the thing is, and what I should be saying right now is that, and this is true, like, the national government, they were right in going in and saying that everyone should have health care, because I think a lot of people have so much going on in their emerging adulthood, in their late teens and early 20s. Like, they probably don't know anything about going about getting health care. And that probably doesn't even cross their mind, because they think their whole life they're like, oh, I'm on my parents' health care, I don't have to worry about it. But as soon as you turn 18 and you break a leg and you don't have health care, well, maybe not break a leg, but have to go under a serious surgery and you don't have the health care, you're going to have to pay a lot more. But then having that automatic safety net, you could say, of everyone having it, that is great, I think. But here's where I'm going to kind of address your side a bit. Here's my problem with Obamacare. We're going to sit down and get real, because I'm very liberal, and I think Obama was probably the best president of our modern time. But here's my issue with Obamacare, and it's kind of very similar to what you touched on. And we can let it go for a little bit. Time-wise, what was I going to say? The issue with Obamacare, as you kind of touched on, is they currently have a system where it's per state. And I kind of think, at first I was thinking that because Obamacare is a national law, it's more national, but I could kind of argue that it's more stately as it is right now, and that's the problem with Obamacare, because as they have it now, it's one company allocated per state. You know what I mean? And the problem with that, as you were saying, is that allows for monopoly. If there's only one company that is that gets to set the prices for whatever is going on with the Medicare and Medicaid and all that, then they're going to put it to whatever they want because they have nothing to fight with, nothing to compete with. But it's like a natural check on our government when we allow multiple companies to compete, because they're going to be fighting for the consumers. They're going to be fighting for the lowest price, and that allows it so the people that are all focused on getting all this money and getting, sucking the life out of the dying people of our country, it stops them from doing that. And what I think the change that you and I both probably see in Obamacare is that it kind of needs to be a little bit both state and federal, where I think both the state and federal government need to say, we need to allow it so any company, no matter what state they're in, can give medical prices to anyone in any state. That's what I think, where I argue national, even though it's kind of not national. I argue more for interstate healthcare. Interstate healthcare is the biggest thing that I think is what we need. It's very pressing, because if it's Arizona has these prices, and then Nevada has these prices, and Maine has these prices, no. It needs to be like, oh, hey, well, this company over in Maine or Minnesota can give you these amazing prices over down here in California. Like, that is our country working together to give people the best opportunity that they can possibly get. It's equality of opportunity versus prioritizing money laundering. You know what I mean?
I think the problem with that idea is just that if one state had the best plan, what would stop everybody from going to that state? And I'm not saying that, like...
You mean, like, moving there, or just, using it?
Using it. Because, then it dries up in all the other states, and it just becomes that state.
You're right.
And, which... I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I'm just saying, like... It needs to be more regulated.
You're right. I would argue, though, that, like, if there was one...
We just switched roles.
I know. I would argue, though, that, what's it called? Even if one state, like, had, like, the best prices, then all that would do is lead the other states to coming to. Because here's the thing, like, if the companies saw that, and they're like, dude, 80% of our marketplace is going towards Maryland when it should be coming to wherever else... they're going to immediately adjust accordingly, because there's nothing that they care about more than, like, losing customers. So I feel like that would be the natural check, but maybe it won't. That's kind of like, we don't really know, but I think that was a good amount of talk on that.
Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one?
Next, this is kind of along the same line of healthcare, but it's support.
And support, sir. Okay. No, I remember we talked about this before. I personally believe, and I'll say both of our stances and then we can go into depth. I remember we talked about this. I believe that the federal government should be the one to install support programs for the poor, the needy, the underrepresented. And I think that the support programs that the federal government does is it has almost the greatest impact on those people. And then I know that we've talked, and from talking to you about it before, that the priority should just go to the states, and that the states should be the ones that handle this support programs. Like, if California has all these homeless people, then California should be the one dealing with the homeless problem. Or if New Mexico has a problem with education and illiteracy rates, then they should be the ones funding their education. But I think the thing is that the support programs that go out federally, they help the country, like, not universally, all at the same time, like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah.
I don't know what the word is that I'm coming up with, but... Simultaneously, there it is. They're simultaneously addressing these problems, because, and what I like to believe is that those federal programs are usually only the most important of the pressing problems that are being curbed. So, for example, even stuff like the Fish and Department of Fish and Wildlife, or, like, Department of Energy, like, any of those things, like, not necessarily programs. Those are programs, but, like, that programs being, like, the bureaucratic part of maintaining our country's culture. I think that the federal government putting that in motion and then, divvying it up into the states was a really great idea, because it allows everyone to go in with the same intentions.
Yeah.
Like, we have the same ideas.
Yeah.
What do you think?
My thing with support is kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like, I believe it should be to the states, because the government, if we had a strong central government, which we do, but like, even more so.
Yes.
If it were to try to regulate every single state's problem, not only would it start messing things up, because they wouldn't be able to get it perfect, because they're trying to run 50 different states, like, each individual problem. Like, here we have a large homeless population. In Florida, they have a large retirement population. Or
Retirement problem.
I don't know. Retirement's not a problem.
Who knows?
A lot of people,
who knows?
Either way. But, so, they wouldn't... To have the central government trying to fix everyone's problems at the same time, I don't think it would work that way. Now, I'm all for, like, grants and stuff. Like, if California says, hey, we have this problem, can we get some money to help? Like, I'm all for that. But the problem, when the federal government says, hey, we need to do this, for every single state, it's not going to work. Because every single state's different. Every single state they're unique, you know? Like, we're not the same thing as Nevada, which isn't the same thing as New York, right?
Yeah.
Like, everything's different, so...
Yeah, I guess you got a point. It's just, I don't know, man. I always think about it, and I just think that, like, leaving it to the states to support, like... I think the states should solve their own problems, yes. But I think support programs that the federal government put out are very influential in the making the changes, the progressing away from those problems, solely because the federal government putting the whole country's eye to these problems really enlightens the people and shows them the direction that they need to go in terms of how to solve the problem. Because I think that, like, especially, like, what's the biggest thing I'd say is equality. Like, you kind of, like, just let the states handle that sort of thing, and it kind of just becomes, like, whatever the parents of those, or the, you know, the elders of those states, whatever they kind of say is kind of what just kind of gets drilled into the kids, and then they exhibit the same or similar behaviors. But if there's the federal government saying, like, no, there's these programs that are definitely reaching out to try to make people feel fairly represented, give them equality of opportunity financially, go to the same schools, to get the same education, the same chances at a job, or even just small things like, you know, reaching out to save our parks and our, you know, national parks, and having federal funding to try to maintain our environment or maintain our economy. I think that the federal government should not just, like, you know, laissez-faire, like, leave them to their devices. And I don't think that it should just be strict limited government. I think the government could do so much with their power, and if you to say that they should just not do anything with it is just ludicrous, in my opinion. But I think it's more of the synthesis of federal with state, if anything, that will bring apart the biggest change in terms of supporting people.
Yeah. And, well, kind of adding on to that, I do think having the federal government support the states, I think that's a great idea. Because, you know, like, each state has their own thing. Each state has their own
Their own thing.
Their own thing.
Their thing.
Everybody's got their thing.
Their thing.
So, but, like, so when the federal government tries controlling things too much, it might just get out of hand. Like, yeah. I personally believe if we gave all the control to the federal government, things would go south real fast. Just because with that much power, people go, oh, we could do whatever we want, right? Mm-hmm. So, and...
Yeah, that's a good point.
And, well, but back onto support. Like, states are... I've said this like 50 times now, but everyone has their different problems, right? But the thing is...
The states know their problems better than the federal government.
Exactly. And just if they would go to the government for help, for money, whatever, like apply for grants. We talked about grants in U.S. government today, so that's kind of why I'm bringing them up. Yeah. But, like, grants are money that the federal government gives to state governments for them to do things. I think that's good.
So what do you think then, because we've been going kind of back and forth about this, what do you think about the federal programs that are in place? Like, do you think that they shouldn't, like, that shouldn't even be what the government's responsibility is? They shouldn't have ever have done that in the first place? The things that they've done to, like, reach out to help, you know, whatever it is, equality of opportunity with education or healthcare or whatever. Like, do you think that the states should have just done that? Because do you think that they would have? I don't think they would have. I think that, you know, even if they have the good intentions of giving everyone a fair chance, like when you leave it to all 50 of the states to make up their mind about who gets what, I feel like there's definitely going to be some lines drawn in the sand, and people are going to get cut out of deals because that's how capitalism works, you know. And that's my biggest thing of like, if the federal government doesn't try to say, because if they're just giving out money to the state, like you're saying, like grants, if they're just giving them money, they're not really doing they're not really having a say in it at all. And that's just kind of becoming okay, no wonder our debt's so bad nationally, is because we're getting all these grants to do all these different things, and all the states are doing all their different things at different times. There's no uniformity. It's just chaos, you know? But I guess it's just kind of the way you look at it, like the way you have to look at a different perspective.
Yeah, well, you have to trust the state governments to be able to do their job.
True.
Which
I could argue that you have to trust that the federal government should be able to do their job.
Yeah, but if the state governments have the power, then they could just do the job themselves. And if they're not doing their job right, then maybe the federal government could step in and say, like, hey, you guys need to be helping your people. You guys need to be helping your society. But, I mean, the people would elect. That's why we have elections. That's why we have democracy. That's why we have a republic democracy. Mm-hmm. We elect people that we know that we want to help us.
And it's so funny because even yet, kind of jokingly, if both the state government officials and the national government officials weren't as corrupt as they are, both of them, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah, honestly.
But the thing is, because of course, like, people that don't favor what I'm saying are going to say, the thing is that you can't trust the federal government to do anything because nothing ever gets done because all the politicians are corrupt and blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing, like, the government is always functioning, and that's like decades and decades and decades and decades of thinking about the same problems.
Yeah.
Like, you read it in AP Gov, like, they're like all these different Supreme Court cases that are ruling and overruling these exact same problems. Like, do you really not think that the national government isn't, like, doing all that they can? Because as soon as the state's gonna get left to their own devices, that's when things get so different. Like, they're like, like the Jim Crow laws, gay marriage rights. Like, you think that right off the bat that gay marriage would be legal everywhere, but no, there's like half the country that doesn't want it. You know what I mean? And then how does it get so divided? It's because we left the states to their devices. The federal government, I'm not saying that, like, on the other end of the spectrum, like, I can't say that the national government should say, this is what we need to support. You know, these are the ideals, because if I do that, then that's just tyranny, you know. And I agree that it shouldn't get to that point. But when it comes to the nation's problems, they're the nation's problems. It's not the state's problems. Because I think, in my argument to that, the states can help the other states. But when the states are left to solve their own problems, I feel like things can differ, I guess, to put it lightly, you know?
Yeah.
What was it? Role in general. That's the last point on our thing. So, at the end of the day, is it fair to say that you think the government should be limited? The things that the federal government has done to support, you know, education, healthcare, whatever it is, support services, it should be on a state-to-state level. Is that fair to...
Generally, I'd say yes. There's obviously things where, like certain laws and stuff.
To
like
prevent tyranny from the national government,
yes.
The national government having all this power, all this strength. While I think that the government should be strong, because I think it being limited is what will lead to it being the most dysfunctional, in my opinion. Because I think if it's... The more... Not the more people are in it, but the stronger and... Not more powerful, but you know what I mean? The more representative that it is, the fairer it will be in terms of the way that they're going to address these problems. If they're big and they're involved, they're actively trying to make a change instead of just sitting on their asses and getting nothing done, which is what happens in the Senate all the time. Got him. So that's the thing. Like, even now I'm saying that the central government doesn't always know what they're doing. But if you leave it to the states, then things just get so out of whack. And I think the national government has done so many great things. You know, like, I don't even know, like the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, that helps with our environment fantastically. A lot of the educational reform, because they do educational reform in states, but they're not always the same. They're always different, and then they have to respect each other's differences and not try to make it uniform. But then the federal government can say, listen, here's where we need to understand. Like, there's these things that we need to hit. And that would allow it to be a little bit, them to listen to each other and say, okay, let's stop disagreeing with each other for a little bit and just see what the federal government wants us to do. Like, I think that's like a natural check on radical idealism or differing from the status quo, certain states, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, how often do states, like, argue with each other, though? Like, I know they have different ideas, but I don't think it's too often that they'll actually, like, debate each other on what each other's laws are.
Mm-hmm.
So, or just kind of with that, like, I believe that when we do keep it to the states and we do keep, like, the rulemaking to the states, it prevents tyranny, like you said, but at the same time, like you said, everybody gets out of whack, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, yeah, there's some things that some states do that are weird, but everyone...
Nope.
Nope.
Everyone...
Well, everyone's different. And the government can't possibly regulate everything for everyone. So, yeah, the states... Yeah, sometimes they'll have a wacky law every now and then, and maybe the government can step in and say, hey, like you were saying, like the Jim Crow laws, like, that needs to stop. But when it comes to just, like, day-to-day things that they're deciding, I think it should be left to the people, because that's
the states,
the states,
the local
states
governments
and the people.
in the states,
because that's where you get the best representation in your own state,
in your own community,
Because
no one understands their problems like the state government.
Exactly, because I mean, the state of California, they know what we're going through. They know, like, the fires that we've been having. They know earthquake stuff. They know, hey, we need to have earthquake-proof houses. We need to have fire-proof houses. We need to have these houses. If the government were to say, all right, every house needs to be, the central government were to be, every house needs to be earthquake-proof, tornado-proof, fire-proof, like, it doesn't apply.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so just as an example, each different state has different building codes,
mm-hmm.
different building laws saying, like, in California...
We can't have basements?
Yeah, like, we don't have basements here because... earthquakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the Midwest, they have basements everywhere because they have tornadoes all the time. Like,
oh yeah, that's why they have basements.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I think the biggest point to kind of wrap all this up is that, like, where you were just saying that the federal government should be giving advice, but it should be mainly left to the states. I think, honestly, like, to use your point to strengthen mine, I think the states should be the ones to suggest and the federal government be the one to act, as opposed to the other way around. Because I think the states, that's their job to suggest because they know their own problems, but I don't think they always know the means to the end to solve the problem. That could be the the easiest, most effective, cheapest, efficient way to solve the problem. But if they go to the federal government and say, here's our problems, we know exactly the length and the level of this problem, we want to do this, will you let us do it? That, giving them the power to say yes or no, I think is what truly is the greatest part of our government in play of working together. Solely because if it's the states saying, like, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to do, we're going to do it now, and this is the way we're going to do it, that doesn't really, I don't feel like it gives enough authority to the federal government, because it's just letting them do whatever they want. Like, it's kind of like the thing with the grants, where it's like just giving them the money and saying, go do this. But that's not what a lot of big grants are. Like, there's categorical and block grants where the federal government says, yes, if you want to do this, there are this and this and this and this that they need to hit, and then I will let you get this money. And that's the greatest kind of federal government check on the state government. And to give you an example of the opposite of where it would be bad is unfunded mandates by the federal government, where they're saying, solve this problem I'm giving you, not a dime, you have to spend your own money. That's when it's the government's like, all right, they're overreaching their boundaries, because they're forcing these people to come up with something, and they're not going to give them any help. Like, that's the opposite. They should feel, this is where my argument comes in over yours, in my opinion, where I say they should feel compelled to involve themselves and to make sure that it's fair for everybody. But if you think that the states can do that, then that's I still think that that's fair. I just don't think as much as it should be for the national government. I think the national government should do it more.
All right. I think that's a good...
I think that was a fantastic conversation that we had. I love being in this podcast with you, Dakota. Thank you so much for taking the time to come over to my house and talk politics with me for time. It's fantastic, and I thank you guys all for coming in and listening to us. If you enjoy this podcast, please feel free to tune in next week where we talk about the controversy of religion and politics.
Oh, alrighty.
Thank you guys, everybody. I hope you guys appreciate it, and we'll see you again next time.
Let us know what you think.